Welcome to the deep dive. If you're learning English, there's a pretty good chance you've had this exact experience. You hear someone who, grew up speaking English. Maybe it's in a movie, maybe just walking down the street. And this little voice pops into your head saying, wow, I'll never sound like that.
Oh, absolutely. It's such a common feeling.
Yeah, and today we really want to dig into why constantly sort of measuring your progress against native speakers can actually be one of the biggest hurdles you face.
hmm
We're going to explore why this happens and maybe more importantly, how you can shift your focus.
Shift it towards something more empowering.
Exactly. Something that reflects your own amazing journey and, all the progress you're actually making.
That's right. It seems natural, doesn't it, to compare yourself to the ideal.
Hmm.
But when that ideal is someone who's literally spent their entire life immersed in the language, well, it sets a bar that can feel miles away, almost unreachable. So we want to help you understand why this comparison isn't quite as straightforward as it looks. And crucially, offer some really practical ways to, focus on your own growth and celebrate every single milestone.
Okay, let's get right into it then. So, picture this. You're putting in the effort, right? You're studying, maybe speaking pretty regularly. Then you encounter native English, could be watching a show, listening to something like this, or just overhearing a conversation. And suddenly, it just hits you.
That effortless flow.
Yes, the way words just seem to roll off their tongue, the massive vocabulary they seem to pull out of nowhere.
The speed, too. How quickly they build sentences.
Exactly. It can feel like you're operating on a completely different planet sometimes.
It really can. And, for many learners, this isn't just a one-time feeling. It becomes like a recurring soundtrack to their learning.
A negative soundtrack?
Yeah, they start noticing all the little things, those subtle nuances in pronunciation that still trip them up, maybe.
Or the sheer number of words native speakers use without even pausing to think.
Right, or the complex grammar they just weave together,
Yeah.
seemingly without any effort at all. And this constant exposure, well, unfortunately can lead to some pretty demotivating emotions.
Absolutely. It's just so easy for those feelings of inadequacy to creep in, isn't it?
Definitely.
You might start feeling discouraged, maybe frustrated, maybe even a little bit ashamed of your own abilities.
Like you're constantly falling short.
Yeah, it's like you're always measuring your current self against this ultimate, seemingly unreachable level.
And these feelings, they aren't just, abstract thoughts. They can have a very real, very negative impact on your actual learning journey.
How so?
Well, that discouragement can really chip away at your motivation. It just eats at it.
Right.
You might find yourself becoming more hesitant to practice speaking.
Maybe developing a fear of making mistakes.
Exactly. Or even starting to avoid situations where you have to speak English. You shy away from them.
Which creates this kind of downward spiral, doesn't it?
It really does. This negative cycle where the very thing you need to do to get better, which is practice and take risks, becomes something you actively want to avoid.
Which is the absolute last thing you need when you're trying to learn something new. You want that spark, that encouragement, that desire to experiment and push yourself just a little bit.
But if you're constantly comparing and feeling like you're not measuring up,
It's easy to just get stuck in your comfort zone.
and that ultimately slows down your progress.
Yeah, and I know for many people listening, you're looking to gain knowledge, maybe quickly but thoroughly, and this constant comparison thing, it just adds to that feeling of being overwhelmed, doesn't it? Like the mountain is too high to climb.
Precisely. So let's maybe shift gears a little bit and really try to understand why this comparison feels so disheartening sometimes. I think it's really crucial to recognize the fundamental built-in advantages that native speakers have.
Advantages just because they were raised with the language from day one.
Exactly. From birth.
Right, so it's not just about the number of years they've been speaking.
No, it's about that constant 247 immersion, especially from the very beginning.
They're just surrounded by it, the sounds, the rhythms, the grammar.
It's all just part of their air, their environment, right from the earliest stages of development.
Okay.
And this early, continuous exposure, particularly during those really critical language acquisition periods in childhood, it leads to something pretty remarkable.
Which is,
An intuitive grasp of the language.
yeah.
They develop this deep feel for what sounds right,
Ah,
for grammatical structures that just flow naturally, for best word choices in different situations. It becomes almost automatic for them.
so like a subconscious understanding they don't even have to think about consciously?
Pretty much, yeah.
Yeah.
It's like they have this internal finely tuned radar for English.
That's a great way to put it, a radar.
And, this early immersion actually shapes their cognitive development.
Mm.
Their brains become specifically wired, essentially, to process and produce English sounds and structures with incredible efficiency.
Wired differently than a learner's brain.
In a way, yes. Think about those subtle sound differences, like the sound or certain vowel distinctions. That can be so tricky for learners.
Mm.
Native speakers have been hearing and making those sounds their entire lives. Their brains and their mouths have developed together alongside those sounds.
And physically too, right? Their vocal cords, their tongue, their lips, they've been trained since infancy.
Absolutely. It's a physical adaptation just as much as a cognitive one. Their vocal apparatus is fine-tuned for English sounds, making pronunciation often feel effortless for them.
Okay, so now let's contrast that with the learner's experience.
Right. So you're likely coming to English later in life. Your cognitive frameworks or your linguistic habits, they're already pretty firmly established by your native language.
So your brain is already wired, but for a different language system.
Exactly. It's already set up to process and produce the sounds and structures specific to your first language.
Which means you're sort of trying to overlay a new linguistic system onto an existing one.
Precisely. And that takes conscious effort. You have to consciously train your ears to even hear new sounds properly, sounds that might not even exist in your native tongue.
I remember struggling with certain English vowels for ages.
Exactly. And then you have to painstakingly train the muscles in your mouth, your tongue, your vocal cords to actually produce those new sounds accurately.
It requires deliberate practice, repetition, lots of patience.
A lot of patience, yeah.
And grammar's another big piece here, isn't it?
Huge piece. Native speakers, they mostly absorb grammatical rules implicitly, just through hearing and using the language constantly from a young age.
They don't usually sit down with grammar books as kids.
Not usually, no. Whereas learners often have to sit down and consciously study the rules, memorize them, figure out the patterns. It's a fundamentally different way of learning the structure of the language.
It really is.
Which actually brings us to a really helpful way to visualize this whole difference.
Okay.
Think about trees. Imagine a magnificent, century-old oak tree.
Okay. Big, strong, lots of leaves.
Exactly. Deep, extensive root systems, strong branches, reaching way out. It's weathered countless storms. It stands there as this powerful symbol of resilience,
Yeah.
stability.
Got it. That's the native speaker.
That represents the native speaker, yes.
Yeah, and the learner in this analogy.
The learner is like a newly planted sapling.
Ah, okay. Small, just starting out.
Right. It absolutely has the potential to grow just as tall and strong as the oak. But it needs time. It needs consistent care, the right kind of nourishment. It's just beginning its journey of growth in a perhaps new environment.
Okay, yeah, I can definitely see where you're going with this. It seems completely unrealistic then to expect that little sapling to instantly look like the ancient oak tree.
Exactly.
They're just at vastly different stages of development. They've benefited from completely different amounts of time growing.
Precisely. That older tree has had decades of gradual growth, constant adaptation to its environment. The younger tree needs time to establish its roots, grow its trunk steadily, develop its branches over many seasons. It's an inherently gradual process. And just like we wouldn't look at a young sapling next to a full-grown oak and feel, discouraged about the sapling size.
Right, you wouldn't blame the sapling.
No. It's equally unproductive and frankly unfair for language learners to constantly compare their current abilities to the seemingly effortless mastery of native speakers and feel inadequate because of it.
That analogy really helps put things in perspective. Language learning isn't a sprint. It's much more like, well, growing a tree, it's a marathon.
It is a gradual journey of growth and development.
And comparing your young sapling to that ancient, fully mature oak just sets you up for unnecessary disappointment. Frustration, even.
Absolutely. And understanding this, internalizing this idea, leads us to a really critical distinction that I think many learners often overlook.
Okay.
And that's the difference between fluency and nativeness.
Ah, right. They aren't the same thing.
They are definitely not the same thing.
Yeah.
Often, learners mistakenly believe that they need to sound exactly like a native speaker to be considered truly fluent in English.
But that's just not the case.
It's simply not the case.
So what does it actually mean to be fluent then, if it's not about sounding native?
Well, at its core, fluency is really the ability to communicate effectively and confidently in English.
Effectively and confidently. Okay.
It's about being able to express your thoughts, your ideas, your feelings, clearly and coherently. both when you're speaking and when you're writing.
So it's fundamentally about getting your message across and being understood. Is that the main thing?
That's the heart of it, yes. A fluent speaker can actively participate in conversations on a wide range of topics.
Yeah.
They can understand complex information from different sources, reading, listening.
And navigate different situations, social, professional.
Exactly. Navigate diverse social and professional situations with relative ease and confidence. The key word really is effective. Effective communication.
And you're saying this effectiveness doesn't actually depend on having a perfect native-like accent
Not at all.
or knowing every single word in the dictionary.
Definitely not. I mean, think about the countless incredibly fluent non-native English speakers you've probably encountered in your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
They might have a distinct accent.
Yeah.
Maybe you can easily tell they're from, say, Spain or Nigeria or Japan or wherever.
Mhm.
Yet they can still articulate really complex ideas.
Mhm.
They can successfully negotiate business deals, build meaningful personal relationships, all in English.
Their accent doesn't stop them.
Simply doesn't prevent them from being highly fluent, highly effective communicators.
That is so true when you think about it. I've met so many people with very noticeable accents who are just incredibly articulate and remarkably easy to understand.
Right.
It really does highlight that it's more about the clarity of your communication and your confidence in using the language,
Yes.
not about perfectly mimicking how someone who grew up speaking English sounds.
Exactly. And think about today's world that's so interconnected. English functions as a truly global, international language.
Used by more non-native speakers than native speakers, actually.
That's right. It's used by people from an incredibly diverse range of linguistic and cultural backgrounds. And each group, each person, brings their own unique flavor to the language. So the primary emphasis in these global interactions is increasingly on intelligibility.
Meaning, can you understand me? Can I understand you?
Precisely. Can you understand and be understood?
Yeah.
That's the focus, much more than perfectly replicating one specific native English accent, like British RP or General American.
It really underscores how dynamic English is. It's not this fixed thing spoken identically everywhere.
Not at all.
It's constantly being shaped and enriched by everyone around the world who uses it.
Exactly right. So instead of seeing your accent as like something you need to get rid of.
There's something to be eradicated in the quest for nativeness.
Yes. Instead of that, it's far more productive and I think far more empowering to actually embrace it.
Embrace your accent. That's a really interesting way to look at it. I think many learners do tend to see their accent as a barrier, maybe, or a sign they haven't quite made it yet.
I understand why they feel that way. But what if we completely reframe that perspective?
Okay.
What if we started to see your accent as a natural, integral part of your identity as a language learner?
As a multilingual person,
So not a flaw.
not a flaw at all. It's tangible proof, a testament to the fact that you've taken on this significant, rewarding challenge of learning a new language.
So it's evidence of your effort, your accomplishment.
Exactly. Your accent carries your personal history with it. It carries your cultural background, the linguistic heritage of your first language.
Wow.
It's like a badge of honor, really. It proudly signifies that you have successfully crossed linguistic and cultural boundaries.
I really like that phrasing, thinking of an accent as a badge of honor. It definitely shifts the feeling around it from something negative to something quite positive.
And think about it. In our increasingly multicultural world, your accent actually contributes something. It adds to the beautiful, diverse tapestry of the English language.
It makes your voice unique. It makes your voice unique. And it serves as a symbol of connection, of your ability to communicate and bridge understanding across different linguistic landscapes.
Okay, so the core message here isn't about chasing this maybe often illusory goal of sounding exactly like a native speaker.
No, definitely not.
But it's about really focusing on your own individual progress, your own growth.
Absolutely. I think the most empowering shift a learner can make is to turn their focus inward.
How do you mean?
Celebrate your own achievements, no matter how small they might seem in the grand scheme of things.
Like what kind of achievements?
Well, did you successfully learn 5 new vocabulary words this week? Fantastic. Did you finally grasp a tricky grammar point that had been confusing you for ages? Amazing.
Yeah.
Did you manage to have a successful, meaningful conversation in English, even if it wasn't perfect?
That's huge.
These are all significant victories. They are absolutely worth acknowledging and celebrating.
So it's about actively tracking your own improvement, isn't it? Rather than looking outward all the time.
Exactly. Maybe keep some kind of record, even just mentally, of what you've learned. Note the challenges you've successfully overcome along the way.
Acknowledge the effort.
Yes. Keep track of your progress in expanding vocabulary, deepening your grammar understanding, improving your listening skills, building speaking confidence. Make a conscious effort to acknowledge the hard work you're putting in,
Recognize the difficulties you're pushing through.
the obstacles you're surmounting, and also recognize your own unique strengths as a learner, what learning styles work best for you. Lean into those.
Because everyone's language learning journey really is unique, isn't it?
Completely unique. What motivates one person or works well for them might be totally different for someone else.
Right.
And when you focus internally like this on your own personal growth and development, it naturally builds your confidence. It really
That
does.
sustains motivation.
It sustains your motivation because you're seeing tangible evidence of your progress, your effort. It fosters a much more positive, much more sustainable learning attitude for the long haul.
You become driven by the internal rewards.
Exactly. The intrinsic rewards of learning, being able to connect with new people, explore different cultures, expand your own horizons, rather than constantly trying to measure up to some external, often unrealistic standard set by native speakers.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So let's make it practical. Say you do find yourself getting discouraged. You're watching a movie, you hear a native speaker, and that old comparison feeling starts creeping in. What's a more constructive approach you can take right in that moment?
Okay, this is where a really practical, really effective technique can come into play. When you notice yourself starting to make that comparison,
Yeah.
actively engage in listening to and maybe even speaking with the speaker.
Speaking with them, like shadowing.
Kind of like shadowing, yes. But, and this is the crucial thing to remember, the goal is not to suddenly sound exactly like them.
Right, because that's the trap we're trying to avoid.
Precisely. We want to avoid that self-criticism loop.
So what is the intended outcome of doing this kind of practice then, if it's not perfect mimicry?
The main aim is to improve your own understanding of spoken English and to refine your own pronunciation and rhythm.
Okay.
Pay really close attention to their tone of voice. Listen for the natural rhythm of their speech. How do they articulate individual words? Where do they place emphasis, stress within sentences? How do they use pauses effectively?
And then try to imitate those specific elements.
Yes, make a conscious effort to imitate those elements. Try speaking along with them, maybe softly at first, focusing on those aspects, the intonation, the rhythm, the stress patterns, rather than trying to perfectly replicate every single sound they make.
So it's less about achieving a perfect copy and more about training your ear, becoming more attuned to the nuances.
Exactly, training your ear to hear those subtleties better.
And training your mouth to produce those rhythms and intonations more accurately in your own speech.
Precisely. It's about becoming more sensitive to the music of spoken English, its variations. And this kind of active practice, it can significantly help you to better understand different accents and speaking styles you encounter. It helps improve your own pronunciation and intonation patterns, which in turn really enhances the overall clarity and intelligibility of your own speech.
Makes you easier to understand.
Exactly. Plus, as a nice little bonus, you'll likely pick up new vocabulary and some really natural-sounding expressions along the way.
And just get a deeper feel for how English is actually used in real-world communication.
You really do.
That sounds like a much more empowering, much more constructive way to interact with the language when you hear native speakers, rather than just passively listening and then feeling bad about yourself.
Absolutely. It fundamentally shifts your focus, doesn't it? It moves from what you currently can't do, which is sound exactly like that specific native speaker right now, to what you can actively do.
What you can do to improve your own skills and your own understanding.
Precisely. Taking control.
Okay, so to kind of bring this all together then, the key message we really want to leave everyone with today is this. Well, it's a totally natural human tendency to notice the differences between your English and maybe someone who grew up speaking it. Constantly comparing yourself to native speakers can ultimately be really counterproductive. It can even be demotivating.
It really can. It sets an often unrealistic benchmark for your progress.
Right.
And unfortunately, it can lead straight to those feelings of discouragement, that lack of motivation we talked about.
Yeah.
True progress and building lasting confidence in your English abilities, it really comes from focusing on your own individual learning journey.
Celebrating your achievements along the way.
Yes, celebrating each of your achievements, big or small, and truly recognizing just how far you have already come. That perspective is key.
And always remember that key distinction. Fluency is fundamentally about effective communication.
Can you express yourself clearly? Can you understand others?
Right. And that your unique accent, well, it's a valuable and integral part of who you are, your identity as a multilingual person.
It tells the story of your incredible linguistic journey.
Yeah,
Don't hide it.
absolutely.
So maybe here's a final thought for you to really consider as we wrap up.
Right.
What if, instead of constantly striving for some external ideal, like sounding perfectly native, what if you channeled that energy differently?
Yeah.
Channeled it into discovering and embracing the unique ways your own voice, with its unique background and perspective, can contribute to the global conversation in English.
Interesting.
What new connections might you make? What fresh perspectives might you unlock just by fully embracing your own individual linguistic journey with all its wonderful nuances and history,
It's about making your voice heard.
authentically and confidently, in your own distinct and incredibly valuable way?